The vampire brides stood aside and lowered their heads as the new female came forward, her steps sounding over the cobblestones. "Is this their mistress?" Elishnish peered at her from where she crouched warily. Glancing to either side, she figured that she could still escape. There were no discernible weapons or tools that she thought could snag her if she dashed away and flew off, though the dress that the approaching female wore smelled extraordinarily valuable. Perhaps it had some magic that could ensnare her. "Miss Lupus Regina," one of the vampire brides said, "this one attempted to escape." "That so?" the figure replied casually. "Guess we can't have that, can we? But weren't these frost dragons all flaccid? The one here's looking pretty feisty. Which one's this, anyway?" "Number 19, another vampire bride replied. "Number 19? Miss Lupus Regina stroked her chin. "I thought we only had 18? Don't tell me they're getting busy already." "Yes we did, Miss Lupus Regina," the last vampire bride nodded and gestured to Elishnish with a pale hand, "and no, they're not. This one arrived less than an hour ago, guided by another from the mountains in the north." Miss Lupus Regina gave Elishnish an appraising look. "So, is this like a bonus, or a spare?" Something about the way she said spare sent another shudder through Elishnish. She began plotting how she could escape again. On one side, the road led into a gate in the wall that marked another section of the city. The other led into the cleared section where she could easily fly out of. Her thoughts were interrupted when another figure appeared in the shadows of the building complex, partially hidden by the walls. If Elishnish was something like a human, she wouldn't have even noticed her there, but, as she was a dragon, it did nothing to conceal the figure from her. Dragons possessed blind sight, which made one aware of a large area around them. It was through not just her vision, but through vibrations in the air and ground, smells, heat, pressure and the presence of magic, all of her already keen draconic senses coming together to paint a precise perception of her surroundings and its occupants. Even a disturbed current of air brushing lightly over her snout would alert her to someone in the vicinity. Elishnish would have ignored the newcomer but for the odd appearance it presented. At first, she thought it was another individual who was clothed similarly to the one that came before, but for large, chitinous, limbs extended from its back. There was some sort of small, squealing humanoid whelp gripped at the end of each, being waved about haphazardly in the air. 4 smaller whelps clutched to the figure's torso, supported by silken strands of some sort. "Eh? Spare dragon?" it said excitedly in what Elishnish thought was another female voice. "Can I get some of that, big sis Lupu? Lord Iron said the ones he killed harvested for parts and I didn't get to try any." Elishnish's focus went between the two. They were siblings? As far as she could tell, they weren't even the same species. Miss Lupus Regina looked over her shoulder, examining the newcomer with her squealing attachments. If you're feeling hungry, Entama, maybe you shouldn't be babysitting?" she said. "I don't know what'll happen to you if Big Sis Yuri does a head count after she gets back and you're 3 kids short." "I'm not hungry," Entama replied, "I just want to save some for later. I've never had the chance to taste the dragons from around here. Anyways, if you're done visiting with Lady Negredo, you'd better get back to Carney before you get into trouble again." "This was for work, no," Miss Lupus Regina protested. "Those runesmiths are moving in and new buildings are being raised for them, so I had to ask Lady Negredo to redo all the counter-divination wards." "I don't want to walk." "I know, can you call Lady Schultier? This is her mess to clean up anyways, maybe I can bum a ride Tilda." Elishnish couldn't really follow what they were talking about, but the part about eating dragons made her want to run away. They were acting so casually in front of her, however, that she feared that some spell or ability would be unleashed against her the moment she tried. Why would anyone even talk so casually in front of a dragon? Maybe it was because they were so strong, but even the strong could be overturned by powerful attacks, of which dragons possessed a plenty. She had slain a fair number of overconfident opponents this way. A void opened in the air between them, something Elishnish had never seen before. She stared at the new sight, trying to make sense out of its existence as it manifested into a circular opening of some sort. A small figure came out from the void, roughly the height of a quagga and dressed in expensive clothing. All of the heads of the beings nearby, including those of Miss Lupus Regina and Entama, lowered in the presence of the new arrival as she fully emerged. With pale features and glowing, crimson eyes, Elishnish decided it was something like the vampire brides that stood nearby, but she couldn't sense how strong she was. Maybe this was the mistress that her mother spoke of? She examined the new arrival carefully. She was smaller than the others, yet incalculably powerful. Elishnish at least had a sense of how strong Miss Lupus, Regina and Entoma were. "You said there was trouble here, Entoma," the new vampire said as she looked around, "but I only see one dragon." Elishnish twisted around to see where the other dragons had disappeared to. They had scattered out of range of her blind sight as soon as the portal appeared. She looked up and saw a tail vanish back into the hoardings on the wall containing the pens. She knew that those of her kind were fast, but that was certainly a lot faster than usual. Even Hedge and Mole had vanished without a trace. "Yes, Lady Shaltier," the strange, eight-limbed figure replied. "Just that one over there. If you're going to kill it, may I please have a bit?" Entoma's words prodded Elishnish into making herself scarce. She darted away, except that, after a few steps, she couldn't. She looked behind her to see the fourth vampire gripping her tail. There wasn't even any sense of effort being placed into maintaining her grasp. If anything, Elishnish felt more like she was pulling against some immovable obstacle, as if her tail had been tied to a whole mountain. Lady Shaltier's voice sounded from behind as she continued to hold on to Elishnish. What's the reason for all this commotion anyways?" Lady Shaltier asked with no discernible sign of strain. "Number 19 refused her accommodations, Lady Shaltier," answered the voice of a vampire bride. "She then tried to leave before completing the standard orientation and training. Something about going somewhere else." "I see," Lady Shaltier said, and her eyes met one of Elishnish's own. "Where is this somewhere else you planned to go? Are there more frost dragons, perhaps? If you are not one of the original 18, then maybe there are more you would like to show us?" Elishnish ceased her panicked scrabbling over the cobbled road, which had been torn apart in her struggles. There were other frost dragons in the Azalizia Mountains, but they had become slaves of the frost giants. The rest of the frost dragon population had simply flown away to other parts of the wide world instead of joining her father, Olisar Dark, in his bid to consolidate power in the glacial range. Elishnish tested the hold on her tail again, with no more success than before. With Lady Shaltier voicing her apparent interest, a vague scheme arose in Elishnish's mind. She could have this powerful vampire remove the pesky frost giants by exploiting her desire to find more frost dragons. Elishnish would then escape at a more opportune moment and have the entire range to herself. "I can lead you to the other frost dragons, in exchange for..." Elishnish felt herself leave the ground, suddenly twirling over the vampire's head as she was whirled around and around by her tail. She was just as suddenly released, and the few dozen demi-humans watching from the northeast threw themselves to the ground as she hurtled over their heads. Hitting the surface of the lake in the middle of the city section, she skipped over the water twice before plowing to a stop. The large wave she created washed under a few lizardman huts on the shore nearby and doused their fires. They hissed in annoyance at her. Why was no one afraid of dragons in this miserable city? When the world finally stopped spinning, Elishnish found Lady Shaltier over her floating form. She flipped over and made to dive into the water, but, before she could get very far, she felt a hand grip the base of her neck. The water disappeared from beneath her, and she landed limply on the muddy shore nearby with a splat. "I didn't like the way you said that," Lady Shaltier's voice floated down from above her again. "Honestly, I had some hope that at least one of you might be at least half as excellent as the vassal I recently picked up, but it appears that all of my luck went into drawing her. What makes you think you're permitted to take that tone of voice with me, By what right do you believe you have to bargain? I thought the message finally sunk in when Lord Ines turned 2 of your number into crafting materials, but perhaps the third time's the charm." "Ains." Elishnish coughed up a mouthful of water. "Huh?" The vampire's voice dropped an octave. "Lord Ines Ulgaun," she cleared her voice. "Once I meet with him, he will father a powerful brood with me. Then I will have his favor, and you will pay for this." There was a long pause after Elishnish's words, and she smirked to herself inside. This stupid vampire realized just how much trouble she was in now, but there was no taking back what she had done. "What did you just say?" Lady Shaltier's voice was deathly quiet. "I said..." Elishnish hurtled through the air again, smashing into the north wall. The world blacked out, and when she came to again, the vampire was standing in front of her head. Was it this mouth from which spouted forth such ridiculous words? Elishnish felt a pinching pain as the vampire's left hand reached down between her jaws. This tongue? Know your place, worm. Crimson eyes flared brightly on a face that warped far more than it should have been able to. Elishnish felt her tongue being stretched out of her mouth. The shaft of a glaive appeared, gripped in Lady Shaltir's right hand, its long, wicked blade pulsing with vile darkness. The vampire glanced up at it briefly, and an equally wicked grin appeared on her face. "She has the right idea, I suppose," she said. "All of you misbehaving reptiles should simply have their tongues pinned to the ground. How fitting that I have the weapon I've chosen for her on hand." Elishnish twitched, then she squirmed and writhed as she desperately tried to come free. But the fingers pinching her tongue were a merciless vice, and the evil-looking blade angled down, inching ever closer. The vampire's unnaturally wide smile stretched and grew. "I see you're quite excited over the prospect of being stuck here for weeks," Lady Shaltir purred to the accompaniment of Elishnish's labored breath. "Mare doesn't have any rain scheduled for the area around Rantle for the next little while since the crops of grain are ripening. It will be very hot on this side of the demi-human quarter, and frost dragons just love that sort of thing, don't they? Maybe we can even cook those eggs in there before they give you any more insolent urges. I wonder what the nobles around here would pay for hard-boiled dragon eggs. It should be an extraordinarily rare delicacy, yes?" Monster. The undead were evil creatures, Elishnish knew, but it was only now that she understood just how evil they were. Why had Hegenmal led her to this horrible place, to be tormented by this exceedingly cruel being? A low sob left Elishnish's throat, followed by another. Why was this happening to her? What had she done to deserve this? Her forlorn display only seemed to entice Lady Shaltir all the more, and Elishnish could only stare wide-eyed through panicked wheezing as the polearm slowly entered her mouth. The edge of the blade touched her tongue, and she convulsed violently as the dark energy of the weapon racked her body. A wail of exquisite draconic agony echoed over the rooftops. Elishnish thrashed and writhed in mind-rending pain, her screams bouncing off of the city walls multiple times before rising out into the night sky. It wasn't until she had rolled over quite a few times that she realized that the grip on her tongue was gone. She tested her mouth for blood. It appeared that the glaive did not actually cut into her, but the horrific sensation still pulsed through her body. A feeling of wrongness fell upon her, a sense of dread that seeped into her very being. Through her pain-addled senses, she looked around and saw Lady Shaltir standing above her nearby, wiping her fingers with a pristine silk handkerchief. The warped features of the vampire's face had vanished, returned to the appearance that was not much different than those of other humanoid creatures. Elishnish whimpered in terror as Lady Shaltir turned her bright crimson gaze down at her, a glow of satisfaction over her face. "Ah, that was so refreshing," Lady Shaltir said cheerfully. "Ludmilla has an excellent sense for these matters, surely. I wonder how amazing it would feel if I went all the way. Well, if ever you are feeling defiant, please feel free to let me know. I will be most delighted to oblige you again." "It hurts." Elishnish stared morosely at the door of the broom closet, holding her jaw open gingerly. The pulsing waves of pain from the horrible, evil glaive still coursed through her body, and she wasn't recovering at all. She felt weak and sick, she felt lethargic, yet she was unable to sleep. Dragons did not possess fast, supernatural regeneration like some other species, but they did have a robust constitution and recovered fairly quickly from even grave injuries if they were afforded the time to rest. As far as she knew, the weapon had simply touched her tongue, yet, after over a day, she still teetered in the same dire state as when she had initially received the injury. She couldn't even detect any real injuries on her person, only a helpless sense of impending doom, the shadow of death that lurked just out of view. Was it some sort of cursed weapon? Recalling the lambent darkness sheathing the wickedly gleaming blade, she believed the possibility high. It could have been some sort of unholy weapon as well, one that inflicted necrotic damage on a victim, leaving wounds unhealable until the attached conditions were addressed. Such weapons she had read about, but not from cargo manifests of traders and shopkeepers. These were weapons listed in judicial documents, considered the tools of assassins and villains and thus outlawed in the Dwarven Kingdom. Not that knowing this helped her in any way. The songs of recovery and healing that she possessed didn't work, and those powerful enough to remove curses and other similar conditions were beyond her. Number 12, the voice of a vampire bride leaked through the thin wooden door. A minute later, she felt the presence of a dragon standing in the corridor outside. Due to her draconic blindsight, she didn't need to open the closet door to see what was happening immediately beyond it. In an attempt to distract herself from the maddening pain, Elishnish focused on what was going on outside her tiny room. The door was so thin that it didn't obstruct much of what was coming across from the other side. When number 12 arrived at the front desk, two of the vampire brides moved to equip magical bags onto his torso. He remained still, even when they crawled over him to secure the straps. "Deliver these to the Fiojura surface outpost by this time tomorrow," a vampire bride said. "You will receive further instructions from the clerk posted there. Have a safe journey." The frost dragon wordlessly nodded, walking out into the open section of wall nearby to take wing, where he vanished beyond the limit of Elishnish's blind sight. Number 5. The process repeated itself several times over the course of the next hour. Why were so many dragons being sent to the dwarf city? It didn't sound like they were mounting an attack. Number 2. The vampire bride's voice sounded yet again. "This should be Mother." Elishnish recalled the number nailed to the post beside Kilistran's pen. As the much larger dragon presence stopped in front of the door, Elishnish rose to her feet. Doing so made her involuntarily close her mouth, and a fresh bout of pain lanced through her body. Her back arched as she let out a hoarse-sounding squeak one would ever expect to issue forth from a 10-meter-long adult dragon. The ridge of her spine bumped up into the shelf above. Boxes, towels and other objects rained down upon her. Her drum landed on her head with a low booming sound. She did not recall putting it there. Considering who else was around, it had most likely been Hejinmal. The door drifted open from the various objects falling against it. "Is something the matter, daughter?" Kilistran asked with an expression of vague curiosity on her face. "What does it look like, Mother?" Elishnish groaned. "No, wait, where are you going? I mean, why are you all being sent to the dwarves?" "Why?" "That's because..." Kilistran paused as a vampire bride crawled up her shoulder. "That's because, it's a job? I believe that's what they called it, anyway." "Job?" Elishnish furrowed her brow at the strange word. "What do you mean by this?" "It is what it is," Kilistran shrugged as the vampire bride hopped off. "Look, Mother needs to go and work now, so be a good girl and stay at home. Hejinmal's still around since they're not sure what to do with him yet. You should speak with him if there's anything more you need to know." Kilistran turned her head away and shuffled out to take wing, quickly rising to the north. Why did she have so many more bags? The vampire bride called for the next number and, eventually, 17 frost dragons had departed to the north on some unknown job and Elishnish was left with her aches and pains. A vampire bride came up to the door. "What do you want?" Elishnish said in sulky tones. The undead female ignored her question, stepping around her to clean up the mess in the broom closet. In a few minutes, everything was sorted neatly again, even the drum was back in its place above her head. Task complete, the vampire bride walked out and closed the door. "Wait," Elishnish called out after her. The door opened slightly, and the vampire bride poked its head in, an unspoken question in its crimson gaze. "My drum, did you put it away earlier today as well?" "Yes." "Why? Is it not one of your belongings?" The vampire bride's head disappeared from the door, and she walked away. "Wait," Elishnish called out after her again. A head popped into the door again. Elishnish quickly reviewed the events of the past few days before speaking. "Ahemau," she winced. "I would like to join the others. Is there any way to restore my condition, so that I may understand what is going on?" The vampire bride blinked twice, and she walked off to the front desk without a word. After a brief discussion with another vampire bride that was working at her post, she returned to the broom closet and opened the door again. The second vampire bride hopped down off of the wall into the demi-human quarter. "Come out to the front desk," the remaining vampire bride told her. "Why?" Elishnish asked. "I'm in pain, you know." "We are sending for Lady Pestonia," she replied. "Lady Pestonia? Is that something like Lady Shiltir?" The vampire bride gave her a long look before replying. "Lady Shiltir is a divine magic caster, as is Lady Pestonia. She will be tending to your condition." The offer of healing was greatly at odds with the memory of Lady Shiltir. Elishnish hesitated at the threshold of her room. Should I inform Lady Pestonia that you're not coming? The vampire bride asked. No, wait, I'll come. Ilishnish carefully slipped out of the closet, taking care not to step too solidly and thus send another wave of pain through her body. Upon reaching the desk, she craned her neck to look around. There was a slight noise as the vampire bride that had hopped off the wall crawled back up again, followed by another figure who seemed to have leapt straight up from the ground. Ilishnish stared as it landed lightly before her. Never in her life had she seen something so small jump so high before. What was the purpose of building these walls if everyone was able to get over them with such ease? The new figure, who Ilishnish assumed was Lady Pestonia, had an outfit that was roughly similar to the Miss Lupus Regina and Entema from before. It, too, she sensed to be of exquisite value. Like Lady Shultier, she could not determine how strong this Lady Pestonia was, so she decided to not try anything lest she suffer another harrowing episode. Lady Pestonia looked up at her with a face that Ilishnish thought was what a Quagga would look like if they were shaved bald. Upon further inspection, however, she did not have the same distinct features as the subterranean race. Poor thing, Lady Pestonia said. How long has she been like this for? 36 hours, Lady Pestonia, one of the vampire brides replied. This appears to be Lady Shultier's work. Lady Pestonia seemed to examine Ilishnish with her strange eyes, reducing someone to a sliver of health and leaving them to suffer indefinitely. Except, did she leave any instructions regarding this frost dragon? Aside from having her return to the pens, none, the vampire bride replied. Lady Shultier left immediately after dealing with her. I see. Well, in that case. Lady Pestonia held her palm out towards Ilishnish. Greater restoration. Ilishnish felt a wave of powerful magic wash over her, sweeping away the sense of affliction which pervaded her body. The magic dissipated, and a tangible sense of relief replaced the sense of wrong that loomed over her from before. She still felt the injury that had started everything, but no longer did she feel that she could not recover over time. The dragons here have a ring of regeneration, I believe? Lady Pestonia said. There are a few Adventurer Guild sessions which may need my attention today, so I will be conserving my mana. Was there anyone else? There is no one else, Lady Pestonia, the vampire bride bowed respectfully. Thank you for your assistance. I'll be off then. If you require anything further, you should be able to find me in the orphanage nearby. Woof. Woof? Lady Pestonia silently turned away and, like the vampire bride a short while ago, hopped off the wall into the demi-human quarter. The vampire bride near Ilishnish peered up at her silently. What? You frost dragons are entirely lacking in decorum, the vampire bride told her. Even though they are much weaker, the mortals I have come to know are far preferable to your kind. You need to learn some proper behavior if you know what's good for you. Wah. Anyways, now that we've dealt with your affliction, we will be resuming things from where we last left off. The other vampire bride retrieved a clipboard from the desk and came forward to stand beside the first. In order for you to join the others, the first continued, you must first undergo orientation and training to qualify, though I suppose most of it shouldn't take long. Ilishnish stretched her neck out to look down at the clipboard. The vampire bride scowled up at her and swatted her in the nose with it. It didn't hurt Ilishnish, but being abruptly smacked in the snout caused her to recoil. Hey! Stop being so nosy, it's rude. She glared down at the vampire bride that had struck her, but she seemed entirely unconcerned. What is your name? Well, I guess that doesn't matter, since we just go by the numbers. Let's see, you're about 10 meters long? That should make you an adult frost dragon. How old are you? 107. Ilishnish answered promptly, then measured the two vampire brides for a reaction. It was difficult to tell the age of the undead. She had no idea how, really, but if they outwardly deferred to their clear elders as dragons did, she thought it was something she could exploit. The vampire bride simply moved on to her next question after the other penned down the response and nodded. You are part of Kilistran's brood, yes? Yes. Kilistran has divine caster levels. Have you gained anything along those lines? Levels? I don't know what you're talking about. Are you able to use any spells or abilities aside from what your kind innately wield? Why she would be required to give away her secrets was beyond her. They wouldn't even let her look at whatever was on the clipboard, Yet they wanted to know everything. If you hide anything from us, the vampire bride said evenly, you may be punished in the future. Elishnish, Hedgenmill's upbeat voice came from behind her, and she turned her head at his approach. I see you're finally getting around to filing your paperwork. Don't forget to tell them you're a bard. That's pretty important, right? Hedgenmill. Hi. The sound of pen scratching over paper turned her attention back around. The vampire bride taking down the information nodded. You're a bard? The vampire bride conducting the interview asked. What sort of bard are you? What sort of? Elishnish muttered before answering. A dragon bard. Isn't that plainly obvious? Then, you can sing? She continued to press her. Perform music. I know some dwarf songs. A dragon bard that sings dwarf songs. The vampire bride taking down notes looked up at her dubiously. Oh, give me a break, it was all we had at home. How about magic? The questions continued. Can you cast spells? Does your music influence those around you? Yes, yes and yes. Why were these even questions? Why was she even answering them, for that matter? This was all Hedgenmill's fault. What about fighting ability? Do you have any skills or magic relevant to combat? You're going to make me fight? They're just basic questions, sister, Hedgenmill said from the side. I don't think there's any need for us to fight since they have much stronger things pretty much everywhere. Of course I can fight, Elishnish answered testily, and yes, being a bard helps. I can sing and dance and recite poetry. I can cast spells and do all sorts of other things. That is what a bard does, yes? I didn't know you could dance, sister, Hedgenmill looked at her. I don't think I've ever seen one of us dance before. Neither have we, said one of the vampire brides. Show us this dance. How about no? Elishnish said, I don't see what this has to do with anything. It doesn't, she replied, we just wanted to see it. Bards are entertainers as well, yes? I am not some sideshow for your personal amusement. Elishnish slammed her right foreleg on the floor. Let's just get on with this inane series of questions. Or shut up, Hedgenmill. Her low growl quieted her curious brother, and Elishnish turned back to the vampire brides. The interviewer continued to scan over the contents of the clipboard. Do you know the locations of all the dwarven cities in the Azalizia Mountains? She asked. Of course, Elishnish sniffed. I know all of the places in the Azalizia Mountains. The clipboard-wielding vampire bride walked away, disappearing down a tower stairwell near to the front desk. How convenient, the remaining vampire bride said. Hedgenmill only knows where Fioburkana is. You will bring him to Fiojura and participate in the activities there. Since you have bard levels, you should be able to improve upon his sluggish performance. Why am I suddenly tending to my older brother? Elishnish complained. I still don't know what this job is about, for that matter. Your tasks will be assigned to you after you arrive. Once your items have been equipped, you will depart immediately. Don't tell me I have to get him there by this time tomorrow. It took him 2 days to get here from Fioburkana the last time around. Was this with your enhancements as a bard? Of course not. Why would I even bother doing that? Anyways, just get there as quickly as possible, the vampire bride told her. There will be time for a proper analysis in the weeks to come. The second vampire bride appeared again, arms piled high with magical bags. Elishnish's attention was riveted to them as they were laid upon the desk. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, oh, it seems like you're being treated as an old dragon, sister, Hedgenmill said. I am not an old dragon, Elishnish snapped. I'm a fresh and healthy adult dragon. Yes, everyone can smell that. That door blocking off your room doesn't seem to help any. You're being gross again, brother. I didn't mean it like that. That's not making it any better. The vampire brides split up between Elishnish and Hedgenmill, each carrying an infinite haversack. The one approaching Elishnish sniffed in her direction several times. She wondered if she could swat her with her talons. You may use this one container for your personal belongings, the vampire bride told her after fastening the magical bag over her shoulder. The others will contain various cargo and parcels for delivery and are organized as such. They will change hands at the various offices on a regular basis, so be sure not to misplace your own items lest they are left behind somewhere. After securing all of the bags onto her body with sturdy straps of some unknown material, the vampire bride came forward with the various articles of jewelry that Hejinmul had described the previous night. Ilishnish watched as the items that were equipped changed in size to fit snugly to her digits, tail and around her neck. As soon as the ring of regeneration fitted itself to her, she felt herself slowly, but surely, recovering from her injury. These accessories are not to leave your person, the vampire bride continued in her instructions, unless a different set of equipment is ordered for use. They are the property of the Sorceress Kingdom, and are not to be lost, sold or otherwise exchanged. Ilishnish peered down at the diminutive vampire bride before her. Obviously, she was never going to let these accessories go. She wondered how they even planned on enforcing this strange set of rules. A manifest has been added to your personal Infinite Haversack, which will be updated with all of the transactions performed throughout your scheduled stops at each post. Keep your deliveries timely and with a minimum of incidents. Lady Shiltir will be most displeased if we represent the new transportation network poorly. Ilishnish's tongue twitched at the mention of the powerful vampire. She had agreed to play along with whatever they were on about for the time being, but she wanted to strike off on her own once she saw all there was to see of this place. Even with the half-hearted attempts at making life more comfortable, it was cramped, noisy and hot. It was not a place where one could sleep comfortably for a month after a decent meal. "Lady Shiltir will be there?" she asked. "Oh yes," the vampire bride replied, "she will be supervising the operations personally. If you're not on your best behavior, you may incur her wrath again." Ilishnish sighed. "Are we ready to leave, brother?" "Oh yes," Hejinmul replied. "They don't look it, but these bags are quite weighty, especially when you have to carry them for long distances. Please don't leave me behind again, sister." "If I'm supposed to take you to Fiordura, why would I leave you behind? That seems counterproductive." "I suppose you're correct. It must be because you did it last time. Aren't you the one that is supposedly learned in those abnormal ways for a century?" "That's true. I guess it just means that our nature is not so easy to escape, even for me." Two of the vampire brides watched with looks of grave concern as Hejinmul hurled himself from the wall, flapping frantically even as he angled down alarmingly towards the lake in the middle of the demi-human quarter. Demi-humans scurried about in mass panic as he skimmed over the ground like some sort of gigantic sausage with wings. "Does he always take off like this?" Ilishnish muttered absently. "No," the vampire bride beside her replied. "Lady Aura was here the last time to provide assistance." "Another lady? There certainly seem to be many people with titles here." Hejinmul managed to level out just before diving into the surface of the water, halving his way out of the bowl and over the city walls. "Weren't you supposed to be helping him?" the vampire bride asked. "What if he had crashed?" "Then it would have been quite amusing," Ilishnish answered. "It would have been a debacle." The vampire bride placed her hands on her hips as she looked up at Ilishnish with a cross expression. "We need to maintain a spotless image, or Lady Shiltir will be furious. She expects no delays, no collateral damage and a low workplace incident rate." "Doesn't the other night count as an incident?" I said low. Ilishnish turned her head and glowered down at the vampire bride, who did not react, as usual. The third vampire bride joined them, taking notes on her clipboard. "Well, he didn't crash, so that's that," Ilishnish said. "He won't be able to hunt for anything with that body of his either unless something just happens to fly straight into his mouth. With a ring of sustenance, there should be no problems." "Humph," Ilishnish sent a puff of shimmering ice crystals into the air. "In that case, he can just not eat until he sheds all that extra weight. Then I won't have to waste my magic on him." "Don't feed the fat one," the third vampire bride murmured as she continued taking notes. "Anyways," Ilishnish said, "I guess I should see where Hejinmul has disappeared to. Maybe I'll find him passed out in a field nearby." She shuffled up to the edge of the wall. With a single, powerful stroke, she launched herself into the sky, sending clouds of frost and dust swirling everywhere. "Have a safe journey," the vampire bride's voice drifted up after her. She glanced back towards the wall with one eye. The three vampire brides were staring up at her with expressionless faces. Ilishnish made 2 large circuits over the city walls, using the currents of air rising off of the sun-baked streets to lift her effortlessly to greater heights. A multitude of figures milled about below for purposes she could not discern, humans and demi-humans of many shapes and sizes moving in nonsensical patterns from place to place. There appeared to be 2 roads leading out from the city to the south and the north, branching out over vast stretches of rolling fields and forested hills. Satisfied that she had reached a suitable altitude to begin the journey back north, Ilishnish altered her course and scanned the surroundings for Hejinmal. A vexed sound escaped her when she discovered his rotund profile far below, not very far from the city walls. She shed her precious altitude again, diving down and circling him several times before settling alongside her brother. Hejinmal, what are you doing? I'm, flying? Ilishnish looked down. They couldn't have been more than 10 meters off at the ground. It was close enough that she could pick up every stone and stem below with her blind sight. A group of 6 humanoids gaped up at them as the 2 frost dragons slowly drifted by overhead. 3 of those things we just flew over had bows. Ilishnish glanced back at them. What are you doing flying so low? If you fly over a glacier like this later, something is going to jump out of the ice and snatch you out of the air like the fatty snack that you are. I'm trying, Hejinmal cried out pathetically. What is there to try about it? Ilishnish furrowed her brow. You could have just used the air currents over the city to bar, never mind. Looking over his corpulent figure again, Ilishnish decided that Hejinmal was too massive to glide properly. How he had managed to make the trip up to Fio-Burkana alone days ago without being eaten or captured was beyond her ability to imagine. I'm surprised you managed to survive the last trip up there. Lady Aura helped me, he huffed out. Magic. Can you, ha. The pitiful sight disturbed her. How could it be that they were siblings? Just hold on, she told him, I'll figure something out. While Ilishnish had used magic to attack others, she had only ever used beneficial enchantments for herself. Well, it shouldn't be that much different, probably. Pointedly ignoring the labored breathing of her brother beside her, she started to sing a soft song. The notes of the gentle melody swirled with the sweet sound of her voice in the air around them as she wove her magic. As the enchantment settled about them, Hejinmal picked up speed and steadily gained altitude. This is amazing, sister, he said excitedly. How long have you been able to do this for? Who knows? She replied noncommittally. We need to be above the peaks before we get to them, so don't stop climbing. Really? I didn't do that on the way north last time. Shouldn't it be easier to go through the valleys? Seriously, how are you still alive? Every frost giant for the hundreds of kilometers along the way must have been sleeping or something. Hejinmal quickly ascended after her sarcastic reply. A few hours later, they were crossing high over the foothills into the mountains proper. You have a beautiful voice, sister, Hejinmal suddenly said without prompting. You're being creepy again, brother, Ilishnish frowned. I mean it. I really do. She shot her brother an annoyed look, and he cringed away. I've happened to overhear several of those human bards around the city while wandering along the walls, he continued after a short silence. They don't sound like that. They don't? No, I mean they do, but... Make up your mind, brother. Hejinmal appeared to give his words some thought. They flew onwards for several kilometers before he cleared his throat to try again. When they are performing regularly, in the town plazas and noble gardens, their music sounds like what I suppose humans consider proper music. When they are using music to weave magic for whatever other work they're doing, however, it doesn't. It's a disjointed, chaotic mess that you can only get bits and pieces out of. It sends shivers up my spine, really. It's like something is wrong, and I can feel it, but I don't know why. With most of her time in the city being stuck in her pen trying to recover from Lady Joltear, she hadn't had the opportunity to explore at all. With her injuries past her, Hejinmal's words sparked curiosity over the new places that she could visit. I guess I'll have to check the next time we're back there. So you're saying that it doesn't sound like that when I weave magic through song? Yes, exactly. When you performed that spell song just now, I think I just heard it the way it was. It had dwarven lyrics, with a proper melody and everything. If it was a human bard from the city, it would have probably sounded like a bizarre and jarring series of incomprehensible noises. It's probably because they are not dragons, Elishnish said. Many races do not understand magic in the same manner as we, neither do they perceive the world by the same measures. You've been around that city for longer than I. There is no beauty or comprehension in its form, only the transient marks of toil and struggle in their brief lives, as countless fleeting wheels pull in countless different directions. All of their efforts will crumble to dust as their histories tell, and even those histories will crumble away. Only we will remain to remember that they ever even existed. That smug, twisted view is entirely Mother, Hedgenmole remarked. It's not as if you haven't seen the Quagoa, Elishnish countered. All these mortals are the same, all that ever changes are their teeming numbers as they struggle in short-lived futility and perish. They have no appreciation for the world in its entirety, only the meager fragment of it that is dangled before them. In being aware of that tiny fragment, they become confident that they understand the entire world. We frost dragons remember everything we experience and may develop a great degree of understanding through the ages, but even we would never become so arrogant as to believe such a thing. Okay, that part is decidedly not Mother, Hedgenmole admitted. Still, it is not mortals that rule the Sorceress Kingdom. You mean those undead? I'll admit a few of the things there are quite powerful, but they are much the same as mortals when it comes to their view of the greater scheme of things. It will take more than a dusty old lich with delusions of grandeur to convince me otherwise, though perhaps with this Dragon Lord that leads them, there may be some promising things to come. The steady beat of Hedgenmole's wings faltered, and he turned to look at her strangely. What? Why would you think Einzulgaun is a Dragon Lord? I'm going to kill you, brother, Elishnish sang sweetly. Hedgenmole's enchantment shattered, and he started to lose momentum. Why? Who else would you think that I would think could kill father so easily? She fumed. I even asked you. You asked if he was a male. You were withholding some pretty important details there, brother. These are your future nieces and nephews in here. What? Why are you bringing them into this? It's not as if anything would change if you knew. Arg. What am I going to do now? Time waits for no clutch, Hedgenmole. They flew on in silence for a few minutes, as Hedgenmole struggled vainly to maintain their pace. I have to leave, brother, she finally said. Leave? But, where? North, over the sea to the frozen places far beyond. If I find a few good currents of wind, someone will latch onto my scent. I wanted to be more selective about my first clutch too. No, wait, maybe I have enough time to string a few males along. What will you do after? Hedgenmole was rapidly running short on breath. Just leave them up there, I guess, Elishnish shrugged. Or maybe set them up on some decent icebergs if I spot them along the way. I don't. His words trailed off into heavy panting. Elishnish restored the enchantments on her floundering brother before he dropped completely out of the sky. I don't think they'll let you, Hedgenmole said after his wheezing abated. They won't even believe you'll come back. That's a pretty good idea, brother, Elishnish said. I've gotten everything I wanted out of them, it might be a good time to just leave. The Sorceress Kingdom is full of powerful casters, they've probably put something on this equipment, or have ways to divine you no matter where you go. Then what do I do? Don't you think this is a pretty pressing matter, brother? It is. I know it is, but, well, maybe we could just ask Lady Shaltir when we arrive in Theodura? She wanted to cook and sell them to these mortals. She did? I mean, what choice do we have? You can't escape, sister. All we can do is ask and hope for a favorable reply. They flew for the rest of the day in silence, and it was not until the dark hours of the morning that they arrived at the surface outpost of Theodura. Despite the early hour, the fortress-like structure hewn out of the mountain was bustling with activity. A stream of dwarves was steadily bringing up cargo from the access shaft and loading them onto sledges, while vampire brides attended to frost dragons flying in and out. They landed on a clear section of the outpost wall, and several vampire brides crawled up to retrieve their delivery. As light as they had felt when she departed from the Erantle, they were now like heavy stone weights after nearly 16 hours of flight. Hedgenmole looked down to the vampire bride who was updating his cargo manifest. Excuse me? His voice lacked a certain draconic assertiveness, which annoyed Elishnish for some reason. Yes, what is it? The vampire bride answered absently, not looking up from her work. My sister here needs to see Lady Shiltia, he answered. Is she available? It's a matter of great importance. The vampire bride scanned the page in the manifest, then looked down into the area where the sledges were being loaded. The dwarves seem to be behind a bit, and it says here that you are to travel together with number 19. That's my sister, Hedgenmil filled in helpfully. Elishnish itched to give him a thwack. Is that so? The vampire bride replied, in that case, you should have about half an hour before there's enough to send you two off with. Lady Shiltia should be near the gate leading down into the city. The two frost dragons looked to the massive, metal gate through the heavy flakes of blowing snow. With so many people moving about, the air was a mix of smells, sounds and movements which made it hard for them to determine who was who. Elishnish looked for the black gown that she had seen Lady Shiltia wearing the previous night. I don't see anyone like Lady Shiltia, Elishnish said. Me neither, said Hedgenmil. The vampire bride turned to point in the direction of the open gates. She's on the right side of the gate under the small pavilion there, wearing the white fur coat and a shonka. Ashwa? Hedgenmil struggled with the word. The fur cap. Elishnish looked back down to the loading area. There was indeed a pavilion at the gate, with a figure in a white fur coat and cap standing within behind a stone desk. They padded around the wall of the outpost until they reached the mountain face and hopped down to the ground. There was a whumph sound as her brother flattened a snowdrift behind her, sending even more snow into the howling wind. Nearly half of those present stopped what they were doing to turn their heads at the sudden noise. You again, Lady Shiltia peered up at Elishnish, then glanced over to Hedgenmil. Well, at least you brought the fat one as well. I didn't expect him to arrive for a few days yet. Is something the matter? Elishnish's voice trailed off as she thought about how she could put her circumstances across in a convincing manner. Lady Shiltia, Hedgenmil said from beside her, my sister needs to breed. I will definitely kill this idiot. The vampire furrowed her brow, and her lips turned down into a small frown. Breed, you say? Well, if that means I get more frost dragons, we're quite busy at the moment, so you have around 20 minutes to get it over with. 20 minutes? Elishnish said incredulously, that's nowhere near enough time, I still have to find a mate and... How about this one? Lady Shiltia pointed to Hedgenmil. Hedgenmil spluttered. That's my brother. Is that so? Let's see, how about... Lady Shiltia turned to look around the outpost with a finger on her chin. They're all my siblings. Oh. Well, that's too bad I suppose. Lady Shiltia looked back up at her. We have an important schedule to keep, so I can't have you flying off to Lord Peroncino knows where. Better luck next time. Maybe you should have used the Temple of the Six Great Gods? I've recently heard that they offer matchmaking services.